I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce to you the board of SECAC. Some may be here, some are yet to join. Myself, I'm Janie Payne, and I am the chair. And if I call your name and you're here, if you could just wave your hand. We also have Jamie Emberson Como, who is our vice chair. We have Frederica V, who is our secretary, LaMonica Jones, who is our treasurer, and Sarah Whalen, who is our ex officio advisor and also helps us with sending out reminders and our announcements and so forth. On our outreach committee, for anybody who's interested, we have a vacancy in the chair role. We have Jen Gegler, who is on that committee, Andrea Keene, and Ms. Taylor. And then from Prince George's County Schools, we have with us Trinell Bowman, who is our Associate Superintendent for the Department of Special Education. We have Karen Andrews, who is the Director of the Department of Special Education. We have Beth Hare, who is our Instructional Specialist for Family Engagement. Marcy Tauchon, Program Coordinator, Family Engagement, and Yvette Young, Social Worker, Family Support Center. And do we have any other Prince George's County officials or anybody else who's joining who we should acknowledge? I just want to make sure. Okay, because sometimes we do. So I'm going to turn it over to Trinell, who's going to provide us with updates from the Special Education Department.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone had an amazing Thanksgiving and you were able to catch up with family, friends, or colleagues. I know I had a nice, relaxing Thanksgiving, and so I hope you did the same. I just ask everyone to continue to lift Prince George's County up in your thoughts and your prayers. As we know, we experienced a horrific accident right before our Thanksgiving break for our students who attended Riverdale Elementary Schools. I just wanted to think about them and lift them up and their families in a moment of just quick silence, if you don't mind. Thank you for that. Just want to acknowledge our Board of Education members as well as Superintendent House, who is our superintendent. We appreciate their support of special education and all they do to ensure success for our students. I just wanted everyone to know I had given you an update at the beginning of the year that we are entering our final year of our current special education strategic plan. And as Superintendent House indicated in his 90-day plan, that we will be updating the strategic plan. So as part of our 2.0 special education strategic plan, Hanover Research will be supporting us in holding interviews with parents and guardians throughout the district to get their thoughts, feedback, and recommendations for our Department of Special Education as we focus on our 2.0 version. What we'll be doing with SECAC as well as our family support staff is asking for recommendations for parents and guardians to be interviewed. And then those interviews will be conducted virtually this spring, again, to gather information. Hanover also is the same group that has supported our T26 Prince George's County Public Schools strategic plan. So we'll also be utilizing parent data from the climate surveys. There were some questions that were specifically focused on special education. And so we'll also be leveraging that feedback as part of our plan, as well as the town hall meetings and other data sources that we'll be looking at as a team as we work to update our strategic plan beginning next year. Our Colin Powell Academy K-8 opened this Monday, so they opened on time as indicated. So I just wanted everyone to know that they officially did open, and that school has an autism program. The students from Isaac Gordine moved into Colin Powell this Monday from the autism program, and then the elementary students will be joining them at the beginning of next school year. So I wanted everyone to know that. And then the next slide just gives a few upcoming events that we have. One, our behavior support changes group will be meeting on Thursday, November 30th. Our IEP backpack series next meeting is on Thursday, January 11th. And then on the next slide, we just have some save the dates for you for our Parent Empowerment Conference, which will be March 16th through April 20th, 2024. Our second annual Autism Summit will be on April 20th, 2024. And then our Maryland Special Education Survey will be coming out. And we'll definitely want to encourage our parents to participate in that. And that concludes my updates for this evening.
Thank you so much, Trinell. I just want to congratulate Prince George's County. I live in walking distance of Colin Powell and have seen it since it was nothing and groundbreaking, and to see what a beautiful, beautiful and wonderful setting for our children. So wonderful accomplishment. Any questions of Ms. Bowman before I move forward to introduce our guest speakers? Just want to make sure. Okay, if there are none, we have such an important topic for us today.
I'm sorry.
Did I hear somebody?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Are we going to have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation?
Yes, absolutely. So
Okay.
I'm getting ready to talk about the agenda and how we'll use time, but at the end, absolutely, there'll be time for Q&A. So, you know, our topic today is the discussion regarding bullying, harassment, and intimidation. And such an important topic. When we had a similar session last year, there was so much interest and so many questions, and our experts were so wonderful in responding to parents around those questions. And so we want to understand more about bullying, harassment, and intimidation, and what it is not. And then also understand from the Prince George's County perspective what our school system is doing. And then we have an external expert who's coming in. So the way that we'll spend our time, we'll hear from Richard Moody and Jocelyn Yale. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. If I'm not, please chime in. And then at 7:05, we'll hear from Marvy Corbett. And then we'll move into the Q&A and comment period and any final thoughts that we have. So let me introduce formally our guest speakers, and we're so happy that they have joined us. And Jocelyn is a school psychologist in PG County. She received her Bachelor's of Science in Psychology and her Master's in School Psychology at the University of Maryland, College Park. In her time at UMD, she worked at the Bullying Prevention and Mental Health Promotion Lab under Dr. Wang, which conducts research on topics including bullying and bullying prevention, school-based mental health services and prevention of mental health problems, mental health literacy, help seeking among culturally and linguistically diverse students, parenting practices, and family involvement. And we welcome you, Dr. Jocelyn Yeo. And then Mr. Moody, Richard Moody is a graduate of Pace University in NYC with a master's from Columbia University in NYC. He came to Prince George's County schools in 1993 and is a former English teacher from Parkdale High School. He spent the last 3 years at Parkdale doing peer mediation and has been in the central office for the last 15 years. He is currently the supervisor for student engagement and school support and has oversight of the following programs and initiatives. And there are a whole host of them: PBS, Restorative Approaches and Justice, Student Leadership, Peer Mediation, Bully Prevention, Alcohol, Tobacco, and other drug prevention and intervention. So we are very, very fortunate to have these resources with us this evening, and I will turn it over to you to move us forward in the way that you deem appropriate.
All right. I guess I'm up. Hello, everyone. I'm Jocelyn Yao. Thank you for that great introduction. Thanks for having me here. I'm really excited to share this topic. And so, as you can see, I'm really passionate about studying the topic about bullying and how to prevent it. And I'm glad to be here to kind of share about it with you tonight. So if you would go to the next slide, please. Just kind of an agenda so everyone knows what I'm going to go over. So I'm going to talk about what bullying is. I'm sure everybody kind of has an idea, but I'll give you a formal definition of what it is. I'm going to talk about what parents can do to support youth who experience victimization and bullying, because we know it has a big impact on their mental health and functioning. Also, what parents can teach youth to do if they do experience it. And then we'll also end with like resources and supports in PGCPS to support our students with bullying. Okay, so if you go to the next slide, please. You can click again. So I wanted to kind of start with an activity to see kind of just to get an idea of what the audience knows about this bullying. And so this, I just want to ask a simple question. If you see the scenario, put in the chat, just answer, is this bullying or not? Yes, no, or maybe. So our first example is Joe says over and over that Michael is dumb. So is this an example of bullying? So if you just put in the chat, yes, no. Yep. All right. So if you can click again, I see lots of yeses and you guys are correct. So yes, this is a form of bullying known as verbal bullying, which I'll go into further detail later. So if you go to the next one, please. This one says Sam calls Patricia a dork and Patricia smiles and laughs. So is this bullying? So I see some yeses, some no's, some not sure, some yeses. If you could go click, please. So this actually is not an example of bullying. So it is sometimes hard to differentiate, but in this case, I like someone who said need more detail. Yes, sometimes you do need more detail. But in this case, Patricia laughs, and so it's kind of you're teasing with them. So it's a form of playful teasing rather than bullying. So if someone thinks it's funny and they're laughing at with you and it's like a joke, then it's not a form of bullying. So it's a little different from the first one, which is kind of like repeated over and over again, where it is really harming the person. Whereas this example, Patricia thinks it's kind of funny, and if it doesn't happen over and over again, then it's not a form of bullying. Okay, can we go to the next example, please? So click one more time. So this one says, everyone defriends Tina on Facebook because Stephanie told them to. Is this an example of bullying? All right, getting a lot of yeses, good job. So can you click, please? So yes, this is an example of cyberbullying, and it's also an example of social bullying, and it actually makes Tina feel very excluded. Good job, everyone. Okay, I got a couple more on the next slide. This one says, Jake pushes Jimmy into his locker. So is this a form of bullying? Right, I see some yeses. No one occurrence, so seeing a lot of different answers. All right, thanks for sharing. Could you please click? So the answer to this one is maybe. So it depends on the context and what's going on. So was it an accident? If it's an accident, it's not really bullying. Was it on purpose? Does it happen over and over again, right? And so in this, if it does happen over and over again, it is a form of physical bullying. If it was an accident and it just happened once, then it probably isn't a form of bullying. So for this one, you would need kind of more context about what's happening. All right, one more for you guys. Okay, click one more time. It says, Bob pushes his girlfriend into a locker every time they fight. Is this a form of bullying? Right. Yes, domestic violence. Good job. So can you please click? So yes, this is a form of physical bullying that's happening over and over again. It is repeated. So it is a form of bullying. All right. Thank you, everyone, for participating. So if you'll go to the next slide, I'll now provide you kind of a formal definition of bullying. So go ahead and click. So bullying, according to the CDC, it's an unwanted aggressive behavior by another youth or group of youth that involves an observed or perceived power imbalance and is repeated multiple times or is highly likely to be repeated. So key definitions here, there's a power imbalance. So one is stronger than the other, and it's likely to be repeated over and over again. So if it's just one occurrence, it may not be bullying. And bullying can inflict harm or distress on the targeted youth, including but not limited to physical, psychological, social, or educational harm. So that is the formal definition of bullying. Okay, please go to the next one. So on the next slide, you might have guessed there's a lot of different types of bullying that can occur. So one of these is physical bullying. So this is when you're kind of hurting another person. It can be you're hitting, you're kicking, you're punching them, you're tripping someone, taking their things, destroying it. So this is where you're kind of like hands-on hurting the person. Another type is verbal bullying. And so this is when you're using your words to hurt someone. So if you're teasing them, you're calling them inappropriate names, you're making threats. And so that's another form of bullying that could occur. The third type is social bullying. And so this one is sometimes a little more covert and a little harder to catch, but it's when you're kind of intentionally hurting someone's reputation or relationship. So maybe you're spreading false rumors about someone. Maybe you're gossiping about them. Maybe you're telling someone not to be friends with someone. So that is a form of social bullying. It can make someone feel very excluded. The last type is cyberbullying. And so this is essentially where bullying occurs in an online context. So it's when someone uses the internet or cell phones to basically harm or spread rumors about someone. And so those are the four main types of bullying that you'll see. Okay, so if you go with the next slide, please. So question for you guys, if you'll click again, how do you think these students might be feeling? You just look at the pictures. You should put in the chat, you can say it. Shame, isolated, yep. Anything else? Rejected, hurt, excluded, sad, yep. Belittled, oh, it's a new one. All right. Yeah, so those are all really good, those are all things that these students might be experiencing because of bullying. So if you go to the next slide, I'll kind of tell you why, why bullying is a problem. So basically, bullying, it inflicts harm or distress on the victim. It can make them feel like that they're left out, and it puts them, most importantly, because they feel left out, rejected, it puts them at increased risk for not only academic problems, but also psychosocial and mental health problems, things like depression, anxiety, suicide, low self-esteem. And it can lead to feelings of fear, isolation, and humiliation, especially if you're doing cyberbullying, which occurs which can occur 24/7, is more anonymous. Bullying essentially makes the youth feel like there's no other solution or way out. And so it leads to these kind of problems later down. So just kind of statistics for you guys, because I know the focus is on children with disabilities. And so children with disabilities are actually 2 or 3 times more likely to be bullied than their peers that do not have a disability. And while this statistic might be shocking, it may be even more shocking that only 60% of these children report that they're being bullied. So not only are they more likely to be bullied, but they also don't report it as often. So my next slide, if you'll go to it, is what can parents do? So I'll kind of go over some strategies that you can do. So the first one is to talk with and to listen to your kids every day. So it's really important that you validate their experiences, and so saying things like, oh, that sounds really hard. I'm sorry you went through that. So really listening to them, really just being kind of open to what they're saying, showing that empathy and connecting with them. Because that's the first step. You want to create a open relationship with your child where you can talk about any issues that come up. Another really important thing is to kind of encourage their self-esteem, right? So sometimes this can be really hard, but you want to essentially try to make the child feel, better about themselves. So you might say things like, don't let their remarks define who you are, be proud of who you are because of X, Y, and Z. So really talking about that with your child, about what makes them who they are and what makes them proud of being who they are. The next thing you can do is to adopt what we call kind of a solution-oriented approach. And so this one is where you as the adult, you're kind of modeling, healthy ways to resolve conflicts, because, when you see bullying, it's kind of a conflict between a peer and another. And so you want to talk about, ways that you can resolve it. Model empathy, because sometimes a lot of children who are doing the bullying are also might be going through some of their own things. And so not only do you want to empathize with your child, but you also want to talk about, what might be going on to be causing all these things. Essentially, the main point is to let your children know that you hear their concerns and you want to help them, so they don't feel like you're kind of ignoring the problem. So if your child comes to it, make sure you listen to them, validate their feelings, and allow for that space to happen. Okay, so if you go to the next slide. Other things that you can do, and this is really important, because is to read and discuss stories, different stories with your children about kind of bullying. And so if you click a few, 2 more times, I have a couple more examples of stories. And so this is really important because sometimes children don't always want to talk about like themselves and what's going on. So if you use kind of like a story, it's a medium to talk about, the characters and what they're going through. And so you always want to kind of choose books where there's a healthy resolution to the conflict, talk about the characters' actions, their choices in resolving the conflict. Was this a good way? Was this not a good way? Was the problem something the main character could do by themselves, or did they need outside help? Also, talk about to your child, have you maybe had a similar problem, or do you know someone who has? How was it resolved? How would you use strategies to solve a similar problem in the future? So really just having that discussion through books can be really helpful for some children who don't quite know how to verbalize what's going on. And if you go ahead to the next slide, I have one more about what parents can do. So it's really important to know the signs that your child might be going through bullying. So your child best. If something is kind of out from the norm, or if there's something that's going on. And so, you want to look for things like, are they complaining of, like bodily pain, like headaches, nausea? Do they not want to go to school? Are their grades going down? Are they more quiet, or are they distracted than usual? Signs that just tell you that something might be going on with your child. Another thing is to always work collaboratively with your child's teachers and schools. And so I think Ms. Amita will talk more about it later. But what's important is to really kind of create kind of a new bullying climate in both the home and the school, and to kind of communicate with your child's teacher if something is going on, and then kind of creating a space where you can talk about it and solve it. The last thing is, it's always to keep in mind, it's always good to seek professional help, because children with bullying are more likely to experience depression or anxiety. So counseling really helps kind of the children talk about those feelings and ways to resolve it. And one of the most common one is actually cognitive behavioral therapy, where you talk about what they're feeling, thinking, feeling, and actions that are all connected. Okay, I have a couple more slides. It's also important to really teach your child social skills and coping strategies. So you'll see on the side, I have one that's really common called WITS. So the 4 ones is walk away. That doesn't work. Try ignoring it. That doesn't work. Talk it out. And the last one is to seek help. So what's important is when you're teaching your children these strategies, tell them to be assertive, but not aggressive. So, going up to the bullying, telling them, hey, I don't think that this is really nice. Can you please stop? In a really assertive manner. It's also important to not react or give attention, because sometimes bullies are trying to get that reaction from you. The other time, children sometimes don't want to tell what they're going on, because they're like, oh, I'm being a tattletale. I'm being a tattletale. You really want to emphasize the difference between seeking help and tattling. So if you're tattling, you're purposely trying to get someone in trouble. But if you're seeking help, it's to kind of protect yourself and people from harm. Another couple of things that you can try to teach your children to do, and sometimes it's a little more difficult, but you can use kind of humor to deflect what's going on. So there's this strategy known as reframing. And so this is essentially changing one's perception of the negative comment and turning the teasing into a compliment. So let's say, a bully's teasing a kid about, having glasses. You could say, they're like 4 eyes, you have 4 eyes. Well, the kid, instead of giving a negative reaction, be like, thanks for noticing my glasses, kind of being in a humorful way. And sometimes bullies aren't really expecting this, so they're very confused, because they oftentimes are expecting, you know, a reaction of anger or frustration. And so that kind of deflects the situation. The agree or so what is another thing that they could do. So kind of agreeing with the facts that, oh, yes, I do have a lot of freckles, or, oh, yes, it is this. And so this one kind of also, when children do that, they're kind of showing, oh, I don't really care. It doesn't really matter. And that also confuses kind of the bully and can be quite effective in stopping it. So those are some of the social skills and coping strategies that you can try. I also give a couple resources here. So when you see bullying, like I said, the statistics show that only about 60% of children report it. And so what you can do as parents is to also report that it's going on. So if you experience it, there's kind of a website that you can report instances of bullying or cyberbullying. I provide the link for you guys here. The last thing that I'm going to talk about is, if you go to the next slide, for cyberbullying in particular, I won't go through all the steps, but I do want to point out that when kind of reporting the cyberbullying stuff, you want to make sure first you document, keep a record of everything that's going on. So any emails, any messages, any things that's are sent, take screenshots of it so you have evidence. And so then when you report it, they know that it's going on. You can report it either to the social media platform itself, to the school, or to even the police if it's continued or very, very threatening. And then I'll end with just kind of providing you with, if you go to the next slide, some resources, links and resources for things that you can use to explore what bullying or cyberbullying is more, and strategies that you can do. And so at this point, I've finished kind of the portion. Well, if you do have questions, we will hold for the end, so you can ask it then. But I'm going to, at this point, turn it over to Mr. Moody, so he'll provide you a little more information about things going on in PDCPS.
Thank you, Ms. Yao. And before I jump into my couple of slides, I did want to go back to one of the slides that Ms. Yao was highlighting in her portion. And it was we don't have to go physically back to that slide. But it was the slide where she actually gave the definition of bullying, which is accurate. But she mentioned one of the key components of identifying bullying, and that was this thing called imbalance of power. And I just think it's really important that people understand that typically we think of bullying, and when we think of imbalance of power, we think of, you know, size. I mean, physically, you know, big or little. And it can certainly manifest itself in that way. But an imbalance of power can also manifest itself in economics or privilege. It can manifest itself in intellect. It can manifest itself in societal ways. You know, like one student is very popular and this other student is not very popular or doesn't have friends. So when you think of imbalance of power, it can manifest itself in many, many different ways. The other thing in the definition that Ms. Yao gave, I wanted to just give an example. A lot of times parents see something and they think that it's bullying, and it may not really be bullying. It could truly be a conflict, but it may not really be bullying. So if, for example, me and Miss Yao are at the bus stop in the morning and, you know, we know each other, we're not best friends, but, you know, we've hung out sometimes and we're always doing goofy things. So she's eating an apple, and when the apple is almost done, she drops it in the back of my hoodie. And everybody sees it, they start laughing, all that kind of stuff. So I tell her I'm going to get her back. So at lunch, I have a fruit cup, and, you know, I'm going to flick a piece of the fruit cup over at Miss Yao to try and get her back. Somebody may see that and assume that that's bullying. So they should certainly snatch me up and say, you know, like, what's going on? And it'll probably come out that, you know, Miss Yao and I are friendly. We're always joking around like that. It's truly not an imbalance of power at all. But it could be that I was at the bus stop early in the morning and somebody did the exact same thing that Miss Yao did, dropped a half-eaten apple in the back of my hoodie. And then it happens again during lunch. An adult sees it, they pull me aside, what is going on? And an adult should intervene when they see something. If it's not bullying, then it's not bullying, but it might be. And then the adult finds out from Richard that, you know, this happens, you know, like almost every day with Miss Yao and or her friends. So now we know that this is ongoing. It is an imbalance of power. And yeah, this really might be a case of bullying. And then, of course, the adult could take the appropriate steps, complete the BHI, et cetera, et cetera. But those are just two of the things that I wanted to highlight from Ms. Yao's excellent definition of what bullying is. So, jumping into my couple of slides here to finish up, I broke up everything into two categories, pretty much prevention and then intervention. So on the prevention side, we certainly have our administrative procedure 5143 that talks about what bullying is, how to report, that it is not, excuse me, acceptable behavior for students, and it's not tolerated in Prince George's County Public Schools. Each year, I believe twice a year, students review the Student Rights and Responsibility Handbook, which also outlines bullying, how to report it, et cetera, that's in the Student Rights and Responsibilities Handbook. Prince George's County has also embraced something called Welcoming Schools. Welcoming Schools is actually an offshoot of the Human Rights Campaign, and it actually has several modules, and there are about 15 or 20 people in the county that are trained facilitators for Welcoming Schools. I'm one of those facilitators. And Welcoming Schools originally was targeting LGBTQ youth who tend to be bullied a lot more than most other students. But there is a specific module within the Welcoming Schools curriculum that is about bias-based bullying. And as a matter of fact, I believe that 2 have already been conducted this year. I did one last year, and there will probably be several more in eDoctrina for school staff. But again, it's very new, and they're trying to roll it out as broadly as possible. Most of our counselors are very familiar with social emotional learning. They're very skilled with working with students with SEL. Specifically for me, I was tasked with finding a social emotional learning curriculum that dealt with bullying. So many people are familiar with Second Step. Second Step is being rolled out as we speak in all of our middle schools. There is a 6th grade component, 7th grade, and then there's an 8th grade. So theoretically, if you are in an academy and you have 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students, 6th graders will get their 6th grade curriculum. 7th graders will continue from the 6th grade with the 7th grade curriculum, and 8th graders will continue, will go from 7th grade to 8th grade with the 8th grade curriculum. So again, that's this year, and we have just actually started rolling that out in our middle schools. Ms. Yao already talked about the electronic BHI reporting form, and I saw somebody in the chat that asked if we could put it in the chat, and I'm sure we can, but just to let everybody know, if there are any parents out there, if you go to any school's website, the BHI reporting form is actually on the school's website.
And Mr. Moody, I just put it in the chat again.
Thank you, Ms. Torshan.
Yeah.
Also, a bully prevention plan is required for every school. As a matter of fact, I believe they were due probably 2 weeks ago. That is a requirement from Student Services. And it's usually the counselors that are responsible for submitting it, but the school is responsible for actually having a plan for bullying if it occurs in their school. What are the things that we are going to do? What are we going to have in place? What are we going to implement to decrease or prevent any incidences of bullying? Next thing is Maryland State Department. Okay. The next thing is that the Maryland State Department has recently, and I mean very recently, posted a new online course. It's Bully Prevention for Maryland Educators. I'm pretty sure that we're going to broadcast that. It is very new. I do know a couple of people that have taken it already. They thought that it was very helpful, very good. But again, this course is for any and all Maryland educators. And I can go to the next slide. And then finally, many schools, when they have a substantiated or documented case of bullying, will opt to put in a safety plan for the targeted student, with the parents' help, and just kind of, these are the things that we're going to do. And safety plans will look different at different schools and for different students. So now I just want to jump into interventions, and I'm going to do interventions for, we can go, yeah. I'm going to do interventions for the bully, and I'm also going to do some recommended, suggested, and this is not an exhaustive list, of interventions for the targeted student. And I think a lot of times we may overlook that the bully also needs to have interventions in place. So I'm just going to go through some suggested ones, some that I've seen, probably some things that should take place when there has been a substantiated case of bullying. So the first one is that initiate immediate conversation with the bully or bullies following an incident. Communicate in a clear, firm manner that bullying behaviors are unacceptable and will not be tolerated. Let the bully know that negative consequences can and will follow bullying behavior. And I can go to the next slide. And Ms. Lakeisha, I do see your question in the chat. Continued interventions for the bully. Involve the bully in role play scenarios depicting non-aggressive behavior. Provide guidance sessions on how to replace aggression with positive behavior and empathy, which is something that Ms. Yao emphasized several times. Have the bully work with an adult mentor who can address the importance of empathy and compassion for others. And that's pretty much what second step is designed to do. Use resources with the bully and his or her parent or guardian that focus on bullying to target behavior specific to bullying incidents. Redirect the bully to complete projects or activities that contribute to the school campus in a positive way. And make sure that the bully's behavior is closely monitored. And I think I probably should have highlighted and made red that word monitor, because once there is a documented and substantiated case of bullying, monitoring is key and critical for both the bully and the targeted student. I can go to my next slide now. Thank you. All right, interventions for the targeted student. And again, this is just a short list. Some schools are very, very creative in what they do in terms of interventions and even preventions. Assist the student in establishing a network of friends. Have the counselor work with the student to improve social skills. Assign other students or staff members to mentor the targeted student. Encourage the targeted student to report any incidents of subsequent bullying. So again, monitoring is key. Group students with the targeted student to foster new relationships and friendships. Make sure that the targeted student has a trusted adult that they can talk to when needed. And I can go to my next slide. Provide reassurance to the targeted student that shows that measures are being taken to prevent any recurrence of bullying. And again, that is something that has to be continually monitored. Relay the message to the targeted student that the bully is the problem, not them. And then finally, assure the targeted student that he or she has the right to feel safe and secure in school. And that's a big part of what welcoming schools that I referenced earlier is really all about. Their laser focus might be on LGBTQ youth, but it's really about teaching staff how to create schools and classrooms that are welcoming to everybody. Why is Richard African American, but he's got 2 Caucasian parents? And it teaches staff how to answer, kids' questions about those kind of things. So yes, welcoming schools does really target LGBTQ+, but the broad umbrella is that it's making schools welcoming for everybody, regardless of what their differences may be. And I think I might have one more slide.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then finally, this is rare, but administrative transfers have been granted as a last resort when something is extremely egregious. I know that I have done one in the year and a half that I've been working with bullying. So, normally, if it is a substantiated case of bullying, there are things that can be put in place that the parents are agreeing with, that the student is agreeing with, that the school is also agreeing with. And then finally, I just wanted to let everyone know that peer mediation should never be used as an intervention for bullying. The 2 scenarios that I described earlier, and it was one where Miss Yao and I were clearly equal. Peer mediation could probably be used in that situation because that could develop into a conflict. But if you know that something is a clear case of bullying, best practices say that peer mediation is never an intervention for a documented bullying situation. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody truly understood that as well. Again, because it is an imbalance of power, and now you're putting 2 people together when clearly there's no real balance there. And why would that bullied student want to be in that room with the student that's doing the bullying? I think that's my last slide.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moody. We're gonna shift over to Marvy Corbett. And Marcy, you're going to grant Marvy access so her slides can be shown. And
Yep.
while that's happening, I can introduce Marvy, and I want to have time. There's been in the chat perhaps some questions. I want to give parents time to ask questions after Marvy is finished for hopefully about 10 minutes. Ms. Marvy Corbett serves as the Director of Psychotherapy and the Director of Educational Advocacy and Consulting at Rebecca Resnick and Associates. Marvi is a licensed clinical social worker in the state of Maryland. She has been in the field for over 15 years and has experience working in a variety of settings, including psychiatric inpatient, residential, partial hospitalization, intensive outpatient, community-based centers, schools, and private practice. Marvi has experience working with children, adolescents, young adults, and adults who have a wide range of concerns, including anxiety, depression, self-esteem, impulse control, stress management, and family or other relational conflicts. Additionally, she has specialties in trauma and ADHD. Marvi has also spent time as an early childhood mental health consultant. She partnered with the Childhood Development Centers in Montgomery County in Washington, D.C., to support children presenting with developmental, emotional, and behavioral challenges. Her work centered on coaching parents, teachers, and educational leaders in the early development of social emotional skills. This work incorporated one-on-one work with children, school observations, parent meetings, school meetings, IEP and 504 meetings, behavioral action plan creation, and linkages to services. Please join me in welcoming Marvi, and we will turn it over to you, Marvi, now.
Hi, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I was just actually wrapping up a group therapy with some first and second graders, so I was running a little late today, but I caught the tail end, Mr. Moody, of what you were saying, and I was nodding feverishly to much of what you were addressing. So I think some of this might be like right on the tails of what Mr. Moody was talking about, particularly about the imbalance of power being such an important distinction. But so I'm going to share my screen here and, kind of go through, let's see. Give me 1 second. Okay, so bullying is super tricky. This is the big piece, I'm sure, of what we're all talking about. Why do we all have to come to the table and talk about that? Is because it's tricky, and it's tricky for literally every part of the system that's involved. And is the definition important? Like Mr. Moody was saying, yeah, it's super important, because what makes it bullying is when there's a power differential between the parties. It is not just someone's being mean to me repeatedly, or they're making me uncomfortable, or I don't like what's happening. There has to be a power differential. And so because of that, in my experience, at least, the word bullying has lost a bit of its meaning to kids. It's being used a lot in situations in which it's not necessarily the case. And who suffers from that are the people and the kids that are actually getting bullied, right? Because it's minimizing their experiences and also distracting from support and help. And so one of the things that I think would help is that we need to have more words and more thoughtful words that describe what's going on interpersonally and with that conflict, other than bullying. So, and being curious, am I in a repeated conflict with this person? Why is this? Are they seeking me out? Do I find myself, is it a hard part of the day, or am I doing something that can be interpreted as conflictual? This is all the beginning of their interpersonal, lives and relationships and styles. And so it makes sense that there's going to be some road bumps, right? It's not like it is a hard thing to get along with every single person all of the time, especially under stress and things like that. And so we can be curious around it while also acknowledging feelings and also adding more words and understanding other than just jumping to bullying. And so that last question of could what I'm interpreting as confrontation be an interpersonal problem that can be mediated or solved? Because bullying is like it's it doesn't make sense, right? Like the targeting doesn't make sense. The level of aggression doesn't make sense. Like sometimes it's just a conflict that we need to work out. And that's really uncomfortable, right? Like addressing conflict directly is a high skill. And doing so in a kind, effective manner takes a lot of skills in order to do that. It makes sense that we feel uncomfortable, that our kids feel uncomfortable in doing so. It doesn't mean that something's wrong. It doesn't mean that there's bullying happening or that like we're under severe duress. This is part of the growing edge that is learning these like really tough interpersonal skills. So what I have found in my work is that kids generally like somewhat expect unpredictable behavior from their peers, right? They're like, some days we're hot, some days we're cold, we're frenemies, we're this, we're that. And even the like out of nowhere aggressive behaviors or passive aggressive behaviors and things like that, like kids can kind of hang with that for a bit. But what really disorganizes them, and this is where it's really tricky for us as the adults in this situation, is when they cannot reliably predict if an adult will effectively intervene to help make the situation better. Right. And that is super challenging because the situation is really complicated when it comes to bullying. And some of us might have, with our best intentions, we would love to reliably make the situation better, and we can't. But the combination of those two things is what is really disorganizing and creates a traumatic experience. And so that's the thing that we also need to figure out how to improve. So we need a plan for both directions. Yes, of course, the student being bullied, the kid being bullied, we have to support them. But we also need to really support on the person that is doing this directed aggressive behavior. And yes, we need, in the sense of like, we can't treat people this way, but it needs to be more involved and compassionate than that. Because there's a need being met by engaging in those behaviors. Let's find out what it is. Let's be curious about it, and let's support those things, because it's easy to fall into like villain and victim modes, and that it can help at times to maybe have those labels. But I think having a plan in both directions from the get-go is really helpful. Okay, so I missed it. So before that, when I was talking about, that what is really disorganizing for kids, that leaves the adults in a super difficult space, right? We're in between a rock and a hard place. It's really challenging. And because kids would rather deal with the bullying behavior, the abuse, whatever, rather than report it, because they're not certain if an adult can reliably actually handle the situation. So they will stay in abuse because they don't know if there's a way out of it. They have to go to school. They have to see these people. They have to see these people's friends. They have to interact. They have to explain situations. They have to explain why they haven't been at school. Like, it's highly, highly stressful. And so reporting it has a long history of making things worse for these students. So we, again, have to figure out is there a way that we reliably show up in a way to help these kids so that they feel comfortable reporting it. And it's not enough for us to just be like, yeah, like we want to take care of it. Of course we want to take care of it. Of course we want to help these children. And the reality is that some of the bullying and abuse that happens is so subtle and so under the radar that even it's going to get missed, right? Because it's so toxic and passive aggressive at times, which the kids continue to feel, and that's really hard for them. So I think, we talk about intervention and prevention. Prevention's our best luck here, right? And starting from, let's get them at elementary school, right? Let's talk about this, and also understanding about aggressive communication, either passive or directed. It's an indication that I lack my communication skills, or that I feel actually quite anxious around directed communication. And so looking at it more in the sense of how do we support the anxiety around this kid who there's a lot of vulnerability in being kind and direct with people, and being confrontational in a more passive way. There's a ton of vulnerability there. It does feel safer to puff up and be aggressive or fly under the radar and be passive aggressive, because you're you're not as exposed in those ways. And so addressing the anxiety around communication from the get-go, and like that being a thing that is discussed, I think could be helpful. Assertiveness training is also really important. And sadly, I think, 3 times a year, I send out a group flyer that's like assertiveness training for middle school, assertiveness training for elementary school or high school. I don't get takers. And I'm like, this is how we help with the communication and an easing in some of these interpersonal issues, is by assertiveness training, because it's a lost art. And I think where parents often can get confused, or teachers, is that they feel like if my kid has strong vocabulary or high verbal acumen, it means they have good interpersonal skills because they're able to like use a good word to describe something. But that doesn't make them effective interpersonally with others. And managing conflict with our peers, who are our whole world when we're young, is really hard. And so I think that assertiveness training and getting back to those foundational skills is really helpful. Awareness building, and like there just happens to be some things that like trigger us, right? Like there are certain things that annoy us more than other things, and that's just a reality of being human and having our own pet peeves. And being in school is like going to work, but like, even more intense than that. Because like at work, we like have our projects and we kind of can lean into this and that, but like it is so social and so interpersonal, and they're also having to get work done, and they spend so much time at school that there's bound to be things that just happen to annoy us. And there doesn't necessarily need to be a rhyme or reason or something we need to figure out about it. But like, what do we want to do with it when like, friend A is tapping their pen or clicking their pen at like the most obnoxious rate that ever existed on the planet, and I can't think, and I'm agitated, and my classroom is overwhelming, and people are yelling, and I feel frustrated, right? Like we need to have like an awareness of like, yeah, around period 6, I lose it. Like I can't handle it. And then so-and-so looks at me, and I just can't deal. And having awareness and strategies around that. The other thing I talk about is impulse control versus distress tolerance. And the way I see those things being like, impulse control requires a bit of distress tolerance and vice versa. But I see impulse control as, this is something I really want to do. Like I really want to get in her face, or I really want to go run out of the classroom, or I really want to do this. And holding that back requires impulse control, where distress tolerance would be, I don't want to go have this prickly conversation with someone, and that makes me really uncomfortable and anxious. Having distress tolerance is going and being able to do that. And so knowing that like those feelings are really like, it's normal to be like, oh, I want to like, I want to be able to do this thing and I can't. That moment of friction is normal, and we need skills around it. And that feeling of anxiety or apprehension around doing things that make us uncomfortable, that's also normal. It's not an indication that something's going to be bad or wrong, and we need to improve our struggle muscle, which is our distress tolerance, around some of these trickier things. And then the other thing, how do I stay okay? Like I was mentioning before, how do I stay okay when all of this stuff is happening? How do I stay within my value systems? How do I get back to that? And these are great conversations to have with your kids. And that's not necessarily how do I regain control of a situation. It's more internal. How do I remain okay in who I am when these things are going on? And how do I have internal boundaries around that and take care of those things? So kind of in an odd sense, we need to develop a community of a non-judgmental place to land when our kid is the one who's being aggressive, when the one who's being a bully, who's doing directed aggressive behavior. I know that sounds a little backward, but we can't have this paradox, this dichotomy, because that hasn't worked thus far. And it also doesn't support the parents who are going through that, right? It can be a very isolating, judging experience to have your kid be the one who's being the aggressor, and to feel like, God, I have to be on their side, even though I know it's wrong, or like, I feel alone in this, or like I'm being judged as a parent. Those are really hard things. But so I think as parents, we have the opportunity, or parents or guardians or important adults have the opportunity to model taking accountability for the impact aggressive behaviors can have, and not vilifying the person, right? We don't want to create shame, because I imagine actually shame is a big component of what's motivating that behavior anyway. But like, how do we talk about, oh, this is the impact, and how do we make it right, and rewarding those efforts to do so? Again, like I mentioned, there likely is a need being met by aggressive behavior. Let's find, like, what are those secondary gains? And those can exist in either direction. I have definitely witnessed and worked with kids who were engaging in the bullying behavior, and they received a lot of, initial gains and secondary gains from doing so, but also from those who had been bullied, right? Like there can be secondary gains as well. And we need to talk about that in a way that's not victim blaming, that's not letting, bullies off the hook, but we just need to be able to talk about it so that we can help inch people towards the right mental health track, because it's not the victim's fault, right? That they're at the receiving end of this directed aggressive behavior, but we also don't want that to become a really important piece of their identity. That's its own separate crisis that is occurring kind of with our teens and our tweens, is that our students and our kids are really heavily identifying with mental health issues and mental illness and those sorts of things. And so we want to explore it in kind of a wider net, other than just villain and victim and those sorts of things. That being said, the school system and the family systems, we should work really, really closely together. And those conversations, it's tight, it's communicating a lot, to include the alignment of, if possible, and I know that this is in some dream world, but maybe if possible, around the family of the aggressor and the person and the victim, right? That there's some alignment around, how do we have accountability? How do we align on this? How do we make sure this is not okay? Like, it's understood that it's not okay, and that there are consequences, either social, emotional, or real, right? Like if you steal something, there's the natural consequence to that. If you punch someone, there's the natural consequence of being suspended or whatever it is. But without being upset or emotional, to be like, these are just the consequences, and we're on the side of everyone making good choices and treating each other respectfully. And our loyalty is to teaching our kids how to manage interpersonal conflict, and act, in a good way. Also, developmentally, our kids might not be in a place where they understand the right and wrong of it. We want to believe our kids have, they're going to get there, right? They're going to have their moral compass, but sometimes developmentally, that's just not where they are. And so rather than trying to lecture them to death around well, this is why it's right, and this is why you don't do that, it can be really effective. It can be helpful to just be like, X equals Y. If you make the choice to go out of your way to seek out Jane, and yada yada happens, this is the consequence, right? I don't necessarily need your buy-in as to why it's wrong. It's a part of cognitive empathy, where they realize that consequence is not, we're removing the gains that they get out of that, because we don't want these secondary gains and the backwards way that the needs are being met. We don't want that to be more important than other things. And again, the adults effectively aligning on the situation on all sides. And that's school, that's family over here, that's family over here, and helping them navigate, because the team that we're all on is getting our kids to a healthy place, and realizing that they're kids and there's growing edges, and bullying is a catastrophic mistake, right? It's a bad choice to engage in that behavior. And we need to help the kid who feels like that's their best strategy right now. And we need to also help the kid who is the collateral damage of that and will have the emotional shrapnel of that. And the families also, because it's really hard to be the parent of, it is really hard to be the parent of a kid who's being bullied. It is really hard to be the parent of a kid who's doing the bullying. It is really hard to be the school professional who is watching this happen and feeling like it's insidious and like I can't kind of get my fingers on it, like it's getting everywhere. It's hard to be all of those things. And so aligning and coming together is one of my proposals for how we help with these situations.